Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Steward. This is a 3-cost action card from Intrigue, and it says choose one, plus 2 cards, or plus 2 coins, or trash 2 cards from your hand. So when you play this card, you get to pick one of 3 options. You've got weak terminal draw, like you get from the on-play effect of Moat. You've got what we call a terminal silver, which is where you're spending an action just for 2 coins, and you could trash 2 cards from your hand. Now, hopefully, if you've watched enough of these videos, you should be able to intuit that the trashing choice is by far the strongest one of these actions. In fact, it's pretty strong on its own. Just a card where you spend an action, you trash 2 cards from your hand. That's already pretty good for a card. The other 2, if they were just a card on their own, would be pretty weak. You wouldn't, for example, spend 3 for a terminal silver when silver itself actually costs a 3. So let's talk about the trashing, because this is the most powerful option on the card. So any card that can trash more than 1 card at a time when you play it is usually pretty strong. It's a lot better than trashing a single card. In fact, it's twice as good because it's 2 instead of 1. But in general, it is very powerful. When you're looking to get your deck thin, ideally you need to be trashing the same number or more cards than you're adding to your deck every shuffle, and you can't really do that with just 1 card per play. You kind of need to do at least 2 or more. So Steward is primarily a very good trash card. This is the main reason why it tends to be bought, is because that people want to trash the cards. You wouldn't buy it most of the time just for draw, and you certainly wouldn't be buying it just for money a lot of the time, because you would rather just buy regular silver instead. So because trashing is so much better early on, you find that people will tend to buy on one of the first 2 turns, on not your 3 or 4 split. You might even buy Steward for 5 if you get a 5-2. Sometimes you can even see people open double Steward, which is where on 3-4 they just buy Steward on both of those turns. Or much more commonly, they might buy a second one on turn 3 or 4, and hopefully try and get a village as well at some point, and then they will just play with 2 Stewards early on. Now, one of the things with trashing 2 cards from your hand is that you tend to have pretty poor early turns. You should be familiar with the concept of Chapel, where when you trash all your cards from your hand, you don't buy anything at all on that turn, like the weakest possible turn. Well, that tends to happen with Steward as well. Usually what will happen early on is that you trash 2 cards, and then you're probably just going to be left with 2 coppers in your hand, and you get 2 money. Now, if there are good 2-cost cards to buy, like that you usually want multiple copies of, so it could be Pawn, could be Lurker, could be Border Guard. There are a lot more examples, Patrician, all over the expansions. Then Steward's pretty good because you get to at least add those cards to your deck while you're trashing. But bear in mind that this isn't super important. There's a lot of decks where you will trash early on with Steward, you'll have 2 money, and you just won't buy anything at all. So even though you're only getting half the trashing that you would from Chapel, and you're still having those turns where you're not adding any cards to your deck, that's still okay. Right, so it's still trashing 2 cards, and that's still pretty good. In addition to that, you're not necessarily going to be hurt by an early discard attack like Militia. So with Chapel, Militia can hurt in that you only get half as much trashing as your opponent did that shuffle, and that can be pretty bad. Chapel decks go very, very fast, and so losing any sort of tempo can be pretty bad. With Steward, it's not so bad because you probably weren't going to be buying anything on 2 anyway, or it wasn't anything critical to your deck a lot of the time. So Militia isn't really going to hurt people that are planning to trash with Steward early on, because they probably weren't going to be buying anything on those turns anyway. You could, of course, hit them on their non-Steward turn, but just be aware that it's just slightly less effective against someone who's looking to trash with Steward early on. Now, a challenge that many strong trash cards have is how you build your deck back up after you have trashed a lot of your starting cards. So if you're playing with Chapel, you will find that people might open like Chapel and Silver, and they only want the Silver early on at that point, just so that once they finish trashing all of their cards, they actually have something to buy. They can actually generate some money with the Silver, because otherwise they wouldn't really have anything at all. So Steward is really nice in the way that once you have finished thinning your deck, you can start playing Steward for money, so you don't need as many silvers, right? You've bought the card that trashes, and you've got a silver essentially at the same time. I mean, it's worse than silver because you've got to spend the action on it, but it's going to start giving you the economy already. Given the fact that after you finish trashing, usually your primary objective at that point is building your economy back up. The fact that Steward is your economy and it's, good trashing at the same time is really, really nice, because, it then transitions into giving you exactly what you want after you've finished your phase of trashing. So many trash cards sort of stop being useful once you've trashed your starting cards. We call them dead cards. So you may hear a lot of people say stuff like, one of the big problems with Chapel is that once you've trashed all your starting cards, you're just stuck with this Chapel in your deck. You can't really play it because you've got nothing to trash. And I think newer players I've seen say this more often, and they sort of overrate the problem of having a dead Chapel in your deck after you finish trashing, because one dead card is certainly a lot better than still having all 10 of your starting cards that are clogging up your deck and getting in the way. Having said that, Steward, you do still get to play it to do something else, and while the options that it gives you are not super strong, it actually, it's a lot better that it isn't totally dead, although I say that, it's not a big problem if trash cards are dead. The fact that Steward isn't is just, it's really nice, because now you just don't have any completely useless, like dead stop cards in your deck once you've finished trashing. So at some point after you've trashed and then you've had this early phase where you're trying to get up some economy, your deck's going to start gaining cards and it's going to build up again, and you're going to need to start drawing. So you may have decided that there is some really important card and you want to play it as often as possible. So it could just be some sort of junker, like Witch. It could be Artisan, for example, just some card that you've bought and now you'll say, I want to play this every single turn. So you're going to start looking to draw your deck, and maybe you don't care so much about the terminal silver. You might have had something better like Bridge to play instead. So what's really nice with Steward is that now, instead of giving you money, it can move into being a draw card, because that's the thing that you want to add to your deck most at this stage. Now, +2 cards is not that great. If you've watched the video on Moat, you will know that +2 cards is pretty weak, and it's got some challenges, like having to have a very thin deck. You can't really make a draw engine with Moat if you have your 10 starting cards, because it will clog up. And it's also, you got to have so many, it's very susceptible to bad draws as well. You can draw stuff in the wrong order. So it really wants you to have a very, very thin deck. Well, the nice thing about Steward is that Steward is also the card that makes your deck very thin. So when you play with Steward for draw, you're sort of guaranteed that there will exist some card in the kingdom that gets your deck very thin, because Steward itself is the one that's doing it. So Steward, if you're only going to consider it as a Moat-like, then it's much, much stronger, and you will see it be useful way more often than you would Moat as a draw card, and that is just because Steward itself has other effects that really help out cards like Moat, in that it thins your deck. So as with all trashers, try not to over-trash. It's easy with Steward to just keep drawing it, just keep trashing, keep skipping your turn, and eventually you've trashed all your cards, and you're like, well, I've got this Steward in my deck. You don't actually have to trash down that quickly with Steward. So one of the nice things with Steward is that because it's also essentially like a silver, once you've gotten rid of all your estates, you're very likely to start getting a turn that is Steward with 4 coppers, or if you've got 2 stewards, you might have 2 stewards and 3 coppers, for example. Well, now you can pick up a key 5 or a 6 card that you want. The 6 is a lot easier if you've only got 1 steward, of course, because you're very likely to collide your stewards after a certain point, unless you could pick up a village. But basically the steward can allow you to just suddenly shift into saying, actually, I really want this expensive card, and for a turn you can just not trash, and you can just jump up in value thanks to Steward giving you 2 coins to pick up that 5 or 6. So what this means is that you can keep the coppers around a little bit longer than you might want to. Bear in mind that Steward is also a draw card, so you can actually, once you've got your deck to a certain thinness, like maybe you have 4 coppers left still, you can actually keep the coppers around for a little bit. It's okay to keep drawing them with Stewards. Once you eventually have enough villages and you're drawing with something else, and you've got other ways to generate money so that you don't really need to play Steward as either of those, you can then go back to start trashing those cards. So you can actually delay trashing all of your starting cards for quite a little while with Steward. It's okay to do that. The coppers are still useful in generating you money, and they work well with the fact that you have these draw cards and these money generating cards in your deck already. It's just the Steward. So obviously, I've said a lot, you do want villages with Steward, because Steward's other two terminal effects are pretty weak. You do need good village support, so Steward, obviously you can't really use it as an engine piece if you've got no villages. Having said that, there are some decks where it still works pretty well as the only terminal in your deck. So there are some kingdoms where you have a lot of +1 action, +1 card, what we call cantrip cards, and they really, really do not like having stock cards in your deck. And with no villages, then of course you only really get to play one terminal. Well, Steward is fine as that terminal. It will help get your deck thin for a cantrip kingdom, and then it's not a dead stock card on its own. Now, it's not brilliant at spending your terminal on just generating you 2 money, but actually that can really help you to continue to hit 8 for a little while. It helps get you over that line if you weren't able to draw all of your merchants or your poachers or whatever is giving you the money. So don't discount Steward in those sorts of decks. It might be tempting to say, there's some other terminal that's better, and that might be the case. But actually, sometimes it's fine to just keep just the one Steward, and you're just going to play that as your terminal. It's just not the worst thing ever. It just prevents you having a dead stock card in your deck. It could also be that the draw is non-terminal but limited. So Laboratory, Advisor, these are sorts of cards where you can't necessarily draw super well, but you can draw a little bit. Well, Steward's really nice then, just because it keeps your deck thin, and again, it's just the terminal. You already have one, you can get some use out of it, you might as well keep it. So just not being a dead trash card can be really useful for these sorts of decks, so do just keep that in mind. And another really important part of Steward is that it's very reliable as payload. So what do I mean by this? Well, when you typically consider a standard draw engine. So we talked a lot about the village smithy archetypal draw engine, with terminal draw. In those sorts of engines, you want to draw your villages first, ideally, and then you want to play your draw cards, and then you're kind of hoping that your payload, which is usually going to be in some sort of stop card form, like silvers or golds, you're going to draw last, just so that you maximise the odds of getting all of your important villages and draw early on. Well, Steward is really nice in that because it can be both your draw card and your payload card, it sort of doesn't really matter what order you draw them in. So if you draw some Stewards early on, well, those are your drawing Stewards. And then any Stewards towards the end of your deck, well, those are automatically now going to be your payload Stewards. If instead you'd swapped Stewards for an equal number of motes and silvers, well, it could be that you drew the silvers first, and therefore you didn't get to draw your deck. But you don't run into this issue with Steward. So Steward allows you to essentially get around a little bit of shuffle luck inherently by the fact that you can pick and choose whether you need the draw or the payload when you draw the card, and so you can pick draw for the first Stewards and you can pick the payload for the later Stewards. This is a concept that you're not really going to see very much on cards until you get all the way to, for example, Wave the Chameleon, but which is sort of makes any card that draws or gives money into a Steward-like. But it is important concept to think about in the way that, having the card give you that flexibility to keep your turn going is really important. So it may be that eventually you shift your deck over to playing some better draw card like Torturer or Smithy or Patrol, and you might still have enough village support so you think it's worth it that you want to keep playing your Stewards for money, and it could be that you end up drawing your Stewards first. Well, in this case, even though you would rather play the Steward for money, you could still just play it as draw early on and say to yourself, well, okay, I'm going to generate slightly less money this turn, but at least I'm going to be able to draw my deck. Steward giving you that option can really help save your turns sometimes. And the fact that you're likely to just have the Stewards anyway from trashing down your deck, is a massive point in Steward's favour. You've already got it, and it's giving you this extra reliability. So engines with Stewards are pretty good, not just because they're thin, thanks to Steward, but also because of the way that you are much more likely to get a draw card when you want it. So in summary, Steward is a card that's very useful throughout the entire lifespan of your deck. It can shift what it's giving you to give you what you need at that time, and that's where choices on cards become very powerful. You know, Steward is quite exceptional, really, in that the choices that they give you are actually really, really good. There's a lot of variety there, and it can give you exactly what you want. So it's almost, if you think as long as you have a village, you know, Steward is already giving you most of what you need for a good engine. It's giving you the trashing, it's giving you the draw, it's giving you some payload, not great payload, but it's still giving you some. Only thing it's missing is villages and buys, really. So Steward is sort of this incredible, like, engine package, and it's pretty cheap to boot as well. It gets your deck thin pretty quickly, and then you already have the engine components to build back up, so you've sort of already started building your engine back up once you finish trashing, because the Steward is the card that you're using to draw your deck a bit. So it's very, very strong overall. It is in the top 15% of all Kingdom cards at the moment, is the community thought about it, and that's pretty good for a 3-cost card. It's also in the top 5 3-card costs. Now, it's not better than, say, Masquerade in Intrigue. You know, Masquerade is exceptional. Same for Chapel. You know, these are 2 very, very good trash cards, and Steward can't beat them, but, you know, those 2 are exceptionally good. But having said that, you know, Steward still being in the top 5, that's really a signifier of just how strong this card is. That flexibility is really, really useful in this case. So yeah, so Steward, it's good for your engines. Make sure to pick it up when it's available. You will see people buy it quite a lot, especially early on. It's just a very, very good card. So what we're going to do now is we are going to shift over to the online client, and we're going to generate some kingdoms that force a Steward in, and we're going to assess what impact a Steward has on these kingdoms. So what's going on here? So straight away, the big deal here is that there is no village. So that's normally a problem for Steward. However, Steward is the only trashing. We do have Ironworks Mill. I've noticed a little combo there. And we do have Conspirator as a way to draw through our deck and generate a lot of money. How do we get buys? Well, can we get buys non-terminally with Courtier? We can by matching it with Mill, which we're going to have a bunch. I can see that it's still worth going for sort of a cantrip kingdom here. We could probably draw a little bit with Wishing Well, but what I want to do in this deck is I want to Ironworks a bunch of mills, I want to trash thin with Steward, and then I've even got vassals as well, so I can start picking up Conspirators, vassals, Wishing Wells, even if I don't draw, or Secret Passage. Going to be pretty good. There's a lot of good, like, reasonable cantrips, and Secret Passage is really nice to guarantee we hit something good with Vassal, actually. So that's pretty nice. We can top deck stuff with it. And I might even be picking up, like, 2 Ironworks. Now, normally you want to watch out because 2 Ironworks and a Steward in your deck, well, that's like 3 stop cards in a cantrip kingdom, but we do have Wishing Well, and again, we can set up Wishing Well as a Secret Passage. In fact, Secret Passage is really good here. There's 2 things that combo with Secret Passage quite well. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I will pick up a Courtier at some point for buy. I think eventually the Steward, it will just be it's going to be the only terminal. In fact, there's barely any terminals on this board anyway. And at the end of the turn, I will just get 2 money from it. Like, that's absolutely fine. It's possible that a Courtier would be better, but I'll have the Steward in my deck anyway. I think the mills are important just so that I can have enough of these that I can use the Courtiers when I draw them. Courtiers are stop cards, so actually it's really important that I get the Wishing Wells. Maybe I only want 1, and all I care about is getting plus action and a buy from a Courtier once, because I think with Conspirator and Vassal, I'm actually going to be plenty fine for money. I should be able to build all the way up to double province, but Ironworks is actually going to empty. With 2 Ironworks, I'm going to start emptying piles pretty quick, and I think this is going to turn more into a 3 pile, and people might shift into buying duchies instead. Maybe we won't get far enough to buy any provinces. I'm not sure. Maybe you just get like 1 province and you buy something else. But yeah, so there's a very good engine going on, and the fact that Steward is here to trash down is really useful. It just so happens that Steward, you're only really buying it for the trashing here. You don't really care about its other 2 effects, but you will still use it for money. I can't see any point where I'm going to be playing Steward for plus 2 cards on this board, That's just because there's no villages. But yeah, so Steward really helps enable the engine there, which is sort of a cantrip kingdom type of engine, and it does very well for that. So pretty strong, pretty good. So here I notice that we've got 2 village types, so that's really nice. Mining village and village. I see we've got Torturer and we've got Bridge. So we've got, with a lot of village support, we've got draw with Torturer, we can play with Bridge, and our only trashing is Steward. So clearly we're going to be opening Steward. In fact, we might get 2 Stewards. We want to trash, and we want to be prepared to be able to pick up curses with Torturer and then just trash them with a Steward. So I might even get 2, so I can pick up like 3 or 4 curses with Torturer plays. But really the aim here is to draw our deck and then play as many bridges as possible. So I might, maybe instead of opening like double Steward, I open Steward Bridge, because is that good? It's just that village is so cheap. And that's really nice here. I don't want to load up with these cards. I would much rather be playing Torturers because they are way better. But I am going to need some economy to help with that. And the fact that Village gets so cheap with Bridge, I might just pick up Steward Bridge. And I might at one point forego a Steward Trash just to play a Bridge, like if they collide, and pick up like 2 villages. I think if I can ever afford it, I would and I want a village, I'd rather have a mining village than a regular village, and that's because I don't actually suspect I will be able to play 7 bridges. We might win the bridge, we might equal the bridge split, me and my opponent. I'm going to get to play 5, and just having extra money generation from mining village is really going to help on a final turn, because the provinces will still cost like 3, and I am going to need the money. But the fact that village gets so cheap with just a little bit of cost reduction is really going to help. But yeah, so Bridge is really the key card. I mean, Torturer is nice. The curses are annoying. It does mean your opponent has to play with Steward, but I've got to get villages. I've got to get bridges. I've just got to build that quickly. And so I don't know if I can actually get away with playing 2 Stewards straight away. I do want a second one at some point, but I might just go Steward Bridge. I will always prioritise trashing estates, but then at some point I'm just going to, even though I've got coppers, I'm just going to use Bridge to pick up villages and then another Steward. And then I will hopefully be able to start getting Torturers and build up. So I think what you want to do with your deck is very clear. Bandit won't matter. We won't actually have any treasures in our deck at all by the end. But, you know, you're going to have to play how you build this by ear and exactly how much money you're generating on turns and like what your draws are like. But, you know, overall, I hope the engine is very obvious on this board. There's a very good engine here with Bridge as payload and 2 village cards and a really good draw card as well. Like, just exceptionally strong engine. And Steward is critical for giving us the trashing that we need. And it gives us a little bit of draw as well, which is quite nice. So here, so we do have other trash cards for a change. We've got Upgrade and we've got Replace. Steward is still going to be better trashing because these cost 5 and this costs 3. If I open 5-2, maybe I will get... Would I rather take Replace than an Upgrade early on? Maybe I would rather take... Well, no, because I can upgrade... I don't care about Replace because I can upgrade estates into villages and merchants and stuff, so that's way better. So if I open 5-2, I'm getting Upgrade and Pawn, but otherwise I'm getting Steward and Ironworks. I'm going to pick up a bunch of mills, just because picking up mills is decent. My only draw is Steward or Minion, unfortunately. Now, Steward's not great. There is 1 village stack, and that's fine. So village Steward is going to be our draw. Otherwise, what are we looking to do? Well, there is plus buy, there is pawn, okay. Merchant generates a bunch of money, but it's only okay at doing that. Is Minion a better draw card? Do we thin and then we just play Minion? Well, what's the challenge with Minion? I mean, what actually are we doing with Minion? We're just going to be getting money from... minions, because we can't really necessarily play merchant in a minion deck because we can't necessarily guarantee that we actually have a silver in our hand at the end, and that's a big problem. We could get a whole ton of pawns and look to play them for like action coin or action buy, but that's pretty sad really with minions. It's not quite good enough and we need a lot of them. We can pick them up with Ironworks. You can do Ironworks Mill with Minion. Now that's decent, actually. You can discard money. So we're not just using Minion for our money. We're using Mill. Okay, I feel a bit better about that. I think we want a Steward to trash, but actually I'm kind of liking Minion as a draw instead of using Steward. Dropping our opponent to 4 cards in hand is still quite nice if their only draw is Steward. So maybe I do want to do that. I think I get Ironworks Mill and I try to start going for a generating load of money with Mill and then drawing with Minion and using Pawn for buys. And I think we can get quite a lot of money doing that. What else would I pick up with Ironworks? I'll get a bunch of pawns. I will get villages and stewards, and because why not? I don't think I care so much about merchants or harbingers, really. I'm going to just trash with Steward, I think. Unless I open 5-2 and I'll trash with Upgrade, I'm just going to trash with Steward. I don't really care about gaining with replacing Upgrade because I've got Ironworks, and that's just a way better gainer all round. So my ideal open is going to be Steward Ironworks on a 3-4. Going to trash, going to gain mills, going to use Minion to draw, and I'm just going to gain a load of money with a combination of these, and I'll be able to at least single province, and it would be nice if I could double province, but I might not get good enough at that. I can eventually get some villages, and I can even play replace in the middle of my turn to probably just start cursing my opponent a bit or milling some provinces. I say mill province, obviously I'm talking about turning province into province and not discarding them with mill. I just noticed that I should probably clear up that terminology. Yeah, so Steward is pretty good for trashing on this board again. As you see, primarily just used for trashing on a lot of these boards because it's really good at doing it. So there's no village here. This is the first thing that I notice. Moneylender trashes, as does a Steward. We have got Ironworks Garden, and I don't really see what else is going on. I mean, what's the engine? Let's imagine we trash down with Steward. What are we going to do? Play a load of merchants with the silver? That doesn't feel very good. We have got Ironworks to gain a lot of them pretty quickly, but I actually think Ironworks Gardens is going to be much stronger. Like, Ironworks Gardens is actually pretty decent as far as garden strategies go. So I think that's the clear winner here. It is just an Ironworks Gardens rush. This seems clear. There's nothing else to really do with the engine other than merchant and wishing well. And while Ironworks can gain you a lot, that's just not very good. No, and you can trash with Moneylender or something, but I just don't like that. I think Ironworks Gardens is just a lot faster, so that's what we're going to do. So yeah, so Steward's going to be ignored because we don't want to trash because this is a pretty weak kingdom and there happens to be something better going on. So yeah. And here comes the last one. So this is very different. So we've got trashing with Upgrade and Steward. We have Witch, which seems pretty important here. We do have Festival and Village as villages, but our only draw is Steward, it's Witch, and it's Minion. Well, Festival Minion is pretty nice, actually, because Minion's like a draw to X card, and Festival works really well with those. In fact, I do quite like that. I think poor old Baron's not really going to work very well in a Minion deck. I think we do want to be playing Witches, so we do want Festivals, we do want Villages, we do want some Witches, but we're actually primarily looking to draw with Minion. I think that's going to be pretty important here. And we're looking to just play a lot of Festivals in a sort of a Minion deck. We don't want too many, it makes it hard to get Minions, but we are going to thin with Steward. If I open 5-2, would I rather pick up an Upgrade? Maybe I just get the Steward anyway. Would I open Steward nothing on a 5-2 here, or would I open Upgrade nothing? But I definitely want to trash. Or would you just go Witch on a 5-2? No, I don't think that's very good. I think I have to trash soon. I really, ideally want Stewards. I don't care for the Baron. I mean, I could trash it later, but I don't care about it. I think I open double Steward, probably. It's going to be easy for me to find time to pick up a village. So I think this is double Steward opening on a 4-3. I'm going to try and buy a village as soon as I can. Then I've got a reasonable enough deck where it's easy to hit 5. And I'm going to start off gaining Witches and Villages, and then I'm going to shift into Minion and Festival, I think. I think once I've got 1 witch, 2 stewards, and like 2 villages, that deck enough on its own to then spike up to hit 5 for minion, and then I'm going to look to start playing a more minion-based deck and festivals, and I'm just going to keep buying these 2 cards as often as possible with that kind of deck, I think. I think that's the key. With villages, festivals, and stewards, we can play the stewards for money and then keep drawing with minion, so I think we're able to generate quite a lot of money on this board, actually. By playing a minion deck, because we've got various ways to play what we call disappearing money, which is nice on a draw 2x board. And there's plenty of available village support because we're going to have a lot of festivals. And yeah, we're going to be able to buy provinces pretty easy while also junking our opponent every turn. So it seems like a very good engine. And I think that's going to be better than buying a whole bucket load of stewards and villages, because the only way to get the buy is through festival, and that's sort of impacting your ability to draw your deck if you're just using steward for draw. Yep, so there you go. So steward very useful on this deck because it's your primary source of trashing, as is the case with most of these. Anyway, as you can see there, steward, very, very good. As long as there's like village on the board, steward is pretty incredible actually a lot of the time. We didn't see any decks that had masquerade and chapel, so it tended to be the best trasher on all of the boards here that we saw, because the better ones didn't show up. Anyway, that was Steward. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.